trauma robs you from your authentic self, from your real self. And that's something that I'm noticing with myself. It's like once you're traumatized, you're gonna put up those defense mechanisms. You're gonna, because trauma is just basically the very simplified, it's basically you being hurt and you promise yourself like, no, I'm never gonna get hurt again. So what you start doing is you start taking up those defense mechanisms and start taking up those fake identities to feel basically a sense of power, because at home you can never feel that sense of power because you're always basically victimized. You're always being hit on, or verbal abuse. And so at home you're just always a victim, and that just eventually you gonna create those walls and you're gonna adopt identities that aren't really you, such as I'm a gangster. And that's just, in that sense, it's basically a defense mechanism, because once we enter this world, we are very authentic. We are naturally very empathetic. We can feel people's pain, and we're very outside focused, right? We don't care about our own insecurities because we feel very in tune with ourselves. And that's how we get put onto this earth in your first years. And what trauma does, it robs you from that, because now you are a very social child, but you start taking up those defense mechanisms to no longer be hurt. And now you become very internally focused, because what will happen is you no longer have the power to be social, because you're so focused on yourself. You're so focused on, in that sense, basically surviving, doing whatever it takes to not be hurt. And that will narrow your mind on yourself. So now you're no longer really socializing with people, so you get very you basically feel very isolated, and you also adopt fake identities to no longer be a victim. And that's where things such as bullying come into play, because what I've also noticed with myself is that I got an example of I'll never consider myself a bully. I even got because I always had like a sense of empathy within me. I could never see a weaker person get picked up on, but I got my own. I know why people become bullies, because I got my own acts that are bullying, but even though my entire personality was not that of a bully, if you get what I mean. So I think I was around 11, maybe a little younger, maybe a little older, but not older than 12, right? And we were just always at our local playground. It was like a football field, and next to it you had like a playground, and we were always over there until like the age of, I think, 14. So we were always over there, just chilling, footballing, right? And one day, I don't know even what really happened, but we started like basically like playful picking on somebody. And I remember that his shoes were on the ground or something, or we were just playful picking on him. So we were just like basically like wrestling or something, and I took his shoes and I ran off with his shoes, and I eventually threw them in the garbage can, in the trash can. And the boy started crying, right? Of course, we were young, and that was always something that because I feel like trauma numbs you from numbs you from the feelings of other people. So you're so focused on yourself that you can't even realize how somebody else perceives this. And that was something that I always had problems with, because I was never like, it was always after I've done something, then I would realize, damn, this really hurt that person. That was the same with the shoes. So I kind of had like fun in it, but not realizing I couldn't see the other person's feelings. So what happened is he started crying when I threw his shoes in the trash can. Of course, right? Like, why would I do that? And that gave me like a shocked feeling. I was like, damn, I hurt them, and that was never my intention. So, and yeah, that was never my intention, and that's just what I mean by it robs people from their true self, because you start to act out of those fake identities that you adopt. You start to pick up on people to basically feel your own power, because at home you're always a victim. So like, you start picking on people that like you can pick up on and be, in a sense, more powerful to them, right? To feel some sense of power because you've never felt it. And what I've also noticed is like, trauma robs you in a sense. Trauma robs you from your true self in a way that, so you adopt those fake identities, such as I'm a gangster, and everything that's not that, you just start, even though you really want to do something, if your mind doesn't perceive it as gangster, he wouldn't do it. And that's what I've noticed. Even right now, just like 30 seconds ago, I got a feeling of like, bro, are you really gonna share this weak shit on the internet? And that's just really crazy about trauma. And I know this is all over the place, right? This is all over the place. I'm talking about a lot of things, but that's just really what trauma does to you, right? You start picking up those fake identities. You start acting out of those fake identities. You start hurting people to, one, to feel your own sense of power. Second, because you're so numb to pain, because you always victimize at home. So eventually you gonna get out of contact with your own pain, and that will also not allow you to feel somebody else's pain. So your level of empathy drops down. So not only are you doing bad things to people to feel your own sense of power, you're also not really in tune with their pain. You can't really process how it affects their life. So it's like, of course, nobody is stupid. Deep down, you know this is not good and things like that, but you can't really process it. And yeah, so the most important thing is how it just robs you from your true self in that way. And internally you start to become your own enemy, because now I just the example that I've gave is like me actually not wanting to share this with the world, because I label it in my own head as weak. And that's really something like, that's also, I got a feeling that trauma also robs you from your true self in a way that you start to care way more about people. And that's also like a defense mechanism, because later on in your life it will become your downfall, because now you care too much about things that you shouldn't care about. But when you were younger, it was actually a defense mechanism, because you learned yourself that like yo, at home I don't matter, so I gotta find a way to matter. So you start to do crazy things to receive validation, and everything that might not get you some validation, you wouldn't do it because you're like, nah, man, they wouldn't like that. And that's in that sense, you're gonna care too much about things. So let's say I wanna have like a mohawk. Just so I cut everything away and I keep this, right? I keep this, like this part. I keep a mohawk. But and I really want to do that, but internally I think like, nah, girls won't like that, or my homeboys won't like that, my friends wouldn't like that, nobody would really like that. And that's so you will care more about that than a person who's not traumatized, simply because you've never really adopted that sense of self. You were never really allowed to express yourself. So you always learned yourself, because that's really what trauma in those households does, bro. Like, people think that they are just hitting their child or just verbally abusing them, but a lot of times your child is just expressing himself. He's just acting out of his feelings, and a lot of parents can't take that, and so they start being overly aggressive. So your child never develops that inner sense of self, because he connects expressing himself with pain. Because he's like, nah, at home when I express myself, I just get yelled at or I get hit on. So to get back to the example, then you wouldn't do that, because you've never actually had a sense of self. You've never really learned to rely on yourself. So you wouldn't take that mohawk. You wouldn't do what you really want to do. And life becomes rigid in that way. Life becomes rigid because and I'm noticing it right now. It's just like, and this might really sound crazy, but that's just how the entire world becomes once you're like, and it still don't feel like to say like, to feel right to say like, yeah, I'm traumatized, because I don't really like the word. It sounds very victimized, like very victim focused. But yeah, like right now I'm like, hey, turn this video off, man. It's very goofy. Nobody would like it. And in that sense, you become rigid because you stop expressing your true self. And in that sense, it will become dead to the soul, dead to your psyche. Because the thing is, if you don't express yourself, you're not really learning. Because the only way how we can truly learn is expressing ourselves through our interests, right? Learning about our interests. And I got an example of mine. When I was younger, I used to learn everything about animals. And not even animals. I was just a child. I had like those periods, and then I would just do research everything about that topic. So it maybe could have been whales. Then I would research everything about whales. Later on, it would be sharks. Then it would be dogs and snakes, things like that. So I always had that cycle of learning about all my interests. And later on in life, it became soccer. I was just learning everything about soccer physically, and also like on the computer, I was looking up footballers, things like that. So I was always learning, and in that sense, you become actually smarter because you're learning about things you love doing, and that's how you really learn. So, but you stop doing that because oftentimes our interests are, you will label them, you will view them upon the view, like you will view your interest through the lens of the fake identity that you took up on you to no longer feel the pain. So you might think you're a gangster now, you're a fake identity, and you look at your interest like that's goofy. Why would I learn about dogs, man? But deep down, you really like learning about dogs. So you stop doing that. You stop learning. And I got a good example of that. When I was younger, I did an IQ test. And this is not to brag or something, but my IQ test was above 130. I don't know the exact numbers. Also because I didn't really finish it because I was just continuously running away. And now looking back at it, at that time I already developed a escape mechanism because I probably didn't really felt safe with people, so I started running away during that IQ test. So they never really finished it, but they said like, yo, at least we at least know that it's this, and they gave like a number that was above 130, something like that. So, but at that time I was already like traumatized, however you want to call it, but I still was like, I didn't get to the phase where you really start taking up those fake identities because at that time it was still like young. So I was still young, and when you're young, like I would even say, even when you're traumatized, you don't really care too much about people's opinions because you, in that sense, you still got your childlike, kind of like your true self, only little bit like I would say in my sense, right, in my example, I was fearful, but I still had like my true self. So I was still learning about things, and eventually I entirely stopped doing that. I stopped footballing. I stopped learning about things that I really like. And you don't even do it consciously. You don't. I never had like, yo, I'm just, how would I say that? It was never like that. I was like, yo, okay, I'm just gonna stop learning about those things. It's like you stop looking at the outside world more than internally. So unconsciously you gonna do the things which gets you the most validation, and that was it. And that really depends on surroundings, but for myself, I'm living in an urban environment, right? The neighborhood that I live in is not that like wealthy or something. So you automatically basically gonna put up like the gangster identity, and I started taking up on that more and more unconsciously and stopped learning about my interests, and I stopped learning. Basically, that's what it's entirely about. I stopped learning, and later on I did another IQ test, and this one was required because I was at that time I was in a juvenile detention center, and I will get on that story later on, right? But I was in a juvenile detention center, and I needed to do that IQ test because it's basically like over here they call it like a PO, and it stands for personality research. Like, yeah, basically that. They're just gonna do research upon your personality to give like the judge a clear, I wouldn't even call it clear, but they just, so that they can tell the judge like, yo, this is Girani son, his IQ is this, his this and barely feel me. You know what I mean, right? So they would give that to the judge, and now it was like I've done my IQ test, and it was like around 90 or something, and that's still like it's still like it was in the average range, right? But my mom was shocked because she was like, "Yo, when you were younger, you did that thing, and they couldn't even really measure it. So you didn't even finish the IQ test properly, but they've already knew that it was above 130, and now you got like 90. And this is not the best people who got like 90, because I also really believe like the IQ test doesn't really mean shit, bro. You could have like an IQ score of like 70 and be a millionaire, bro. So it doesn't really mean shit, but it's just like my mom was like, damn. And now looking back at it, I wasn't even using parts of my brain. And that's real crazy. As soon as I start improving myself, that's when I really got the chance to observe myself. And that's what I mean with, and that's another, now we're gonna come back on again on why trauma robs you of your true self, because you're not even aware that you're living through a fake self. I was just so hyper stimulated by doing bad things and just so stimulated by doing doing bad things. And I never was aware of that you can actually choose to do things and don't do things. It was like everything that I labeled as weak, I wouldn't do it. So life becomes very dangerous, because that's why I actually also believe why people kill people, is because it makes you overly emotional. You will kill a person to not have that inner feeling of like, I'm weak. And I've been there. And that's a very hard, life is really hard, because you don't feel comfortable in your body. You feel your heart is almost beating out of your chest, and you can feel like, damn, if I don't do this, I will be weak. And I would even say, because weak is really like, it also reminds you of how you was when you was like a younger child being abused, and you start to dread that feeling. You start to hate that feeling. I remember my mom telling me things like, so and now we're gonna get back to my IQ test example, right? So I was always just running away. I was always running away at things that when I was fearful in a situation, I just ran away. So even in school, I started running away at a very, very early age. Like my mom, and this was, I think it started around 6, maybe even younger. And my mom would drop me at school like 8:30, and around 9 or 9:30, I was already gone. So my mom brought me to school, and I always ran either to my granny, or I just ran away and was chilling on the street. Like that was what I was doing, like at 6 years old. And I just now I got like a vivid image of like what I was doing when I was like 6, 7. I remember I was chilling on like a balcony or something with like another dude who was always also skipping school. We was like 7, 8, just being bad on the street. But So yeah, I started always running away out of situations. And now I understand why, because you start to hate the feeling of being fearful, because fear is on an inevitable, right? You will always feel that, but you start to hate the feeling because fear reminds you of how you was when you was like a helpless child being abused by whoever, right? So you start hate the feeling of fear. So whenever I got fearful, I just ran away. And later on, I did that on tests. If I had like a test and I started being fearful about, no, I might fail this, or then I just ran away. I just walked out of class or things like that. But now I gave so much examples, I don't know where I was at. But so yeah, so I always start running away, and I remember my mom asking me, like, "Are you afraid?" And as soon as she asked me that, I would just snap. I would become very angry. Damn, I don't know what's wrong today, but it feels like my English is very tight, bro. But yeah, I became very angry, and now looking back, I understand why. So you start hating the feeling of being fearful. So whatever gives you that sense of fear, you will just you will do everything to not feel that feeling of how you felt when you were younger. So you start taking up those fake identities, and oftentimes those fake identities are the only ways how you get like a feeling of a sense of self. And I've never had that because I feel like trauma robs you from that. So I adopt those fake identities, but now I took up the identity of like a tough dude, a gangster. But now there were actually people looking up to me like, damn, he is really, you see what he's doing, he's in the streets. And it sounds very wrong, but that's just what you will, that's the only way how you will finally get some validation that you never received from home. So you finally feel like a person. And but you start doing, of course, you start doing very wrongful things, but you will do everything to not lose that identity. And that's why I say, like, that's really why I think a lot of people kill people, is because if you got like a mental feeling of I'm a gangster, you will do everything. And the thing is, you're not even addicted to like the feeling of a gangster. You're addicted to the validation that the identity of the gangster gives you. Because at home, you're not shit. Your parents don't, they might love you, but they don't feel like that. So, but now you find like a defense mechanism to no longer be hurt. So you start being overtly tough, and unconsciously you notice like, damn, when I'm tough, people actually look up to me. I actually get some validation. So you start falling into that. It becomes stronger and stronger, that feeling, that identity. Now you label yourself as a gangster, things like that, okay? And now when somebody like tests you, or you get like into an argument, you unconsciously be like, damn, if I let this slide, I'm losing my identity as a gangster, and that identity is the only way how I can feel loved by the world. So you will start doing everything to keep that identity in there. And that's why I really believe why people kill people is in most situations, right, when it comes to street things, is because they They don't want that false identity to be challenged, because that means it will feel for them that they're nothing then, right? Then they just will be the traumatized children that have no sense of self. They still actually don't got a sense of self, but they got like a fake sense of self. So yeah, and this is just, I've basically went on a rant this entire video. We're like 30 minutes in. I don't even know if I'm gonna keep this running, right? Because it's like, trauma is so crazy, because it also manifests in a lot of ways. Because I took the identity of like, I start creating a defense mechanism of somebody who's like tough, things like that. But there are also people that start to take up defense mechanisms as overtly nice, because I started like biting away. Like when people would try to hurt me, I started biting. And another person would maybe be like overtly nice to feel like, okay, when I'm overtly nice, then people won't hurt me or do things like that. And that's how nice guys are created. And that's very important to realize. Is like, bro, like nice guys aren't really nice. They just adopted that feeling of the need to be nice to no longer feel pain. So in a sense, they're also traumatized. And that's why nice guys aren't successful with girls or just in life. People always walk over them. Why? Because they feel that they're not their true self. And that's also, even when I was in the streets and I had like that gangster identity, I always felt that people could see through me. And that's really what it is, bro. Because yes, I maybe could impress some other dudes, oftentimes dudes who were also traumatized, right? So they start looking up to me. But I always had like a feeling of people can actually see through you. And they will feel your inauthenticity. Damn. So they will feel that. And that's really crazy, because it actually gives you a feeling of like, I don't know, like, and that's why I say like, now I'm just gonna go on another rant again, and I don't even really. The thing is really like, you have all those ideas, but you can't really express them into words. But yeah, just trauma robs you from your true self. And like now I'm just also noticing I'm getting very frustrated, because like, I don't know, it just feels like fucked up talking about this shit, right? This shit's crazy, bro. So, yeah, I'm out.